Brown versus Board of Education, presented by Haley Kirk and Cheyenne Foster. In the early 1950s, segregation in all aspects of life was normal all across America, and while this meant a divided, separated school system, officials still assured the public that the separate facilities were still equal, which was commonly not true. A third grader in Topeka, Kansas, Linda Brown, an African-American girl, was forced to walk a mile to a railroad switchyard to get to a black school every day, while a white school was located only 7 blocks away. Oliver Brown, Linda's father, attempted to enroll her there, but the principal flatly refused.
No.
It was after this that the Brown family contacted McKinley Burnett, head of the Topeka branch of the NAACP, who gladly accepted the challenge of the case to further their goal to the civil rights. Soon many black parents joined Brown, and in 1951 the district court heard their case June 25th and June 26th. There it was argued that the segregating of the schools made black children feel inferior to whites, thus making them unequal. Dr. Hugh W. Spears testified after surveying all of the local schools that if the colored children are denied the experience in school of associating with white children who represent 90% of our national society in which these colored children must live, then the colored child's curriculum is being greatly curtailed. The Topeka curriculum of any school curriculum cannot be equal under segregation. The Board of Education defended that this segregation simply prepared children for the segregation that would encounter for the rest of their lives. They furthered their innocence with mention of great African Americans who endured far more than separate schooling, such as George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, and Frederick Douglass. With demanding an injunction, the court found itself in an uncomfortable predicament. While agreeing with expert witness, including Dr. Spear, they concluded that segregation was a negative influence on the children and that a sense of inferiority affects the motivation of a child to learn. The recent case of Plessy versus Ferguson, which followed a precedent of separate but equal school systems, it had no Supreme Court ruling to judge from. Because of this, though the court mutually agreed with the complaints, they ruled in favor of the Board of Education, as they were expected to do. The NAACP and Brown appealed to the Supreme Court, and the case was combined with several others that challenged segregation in schools. The case was first heard on December 9, 1952, but a decision was not reached. A re-argument followed from December 7th to 8th, where the circumstances surrounding the adoption of the 14th Amendment was discussed, which aided the argument very little. It was decided that they would not question the intentions of desegregation behind the writers of the amendment, but instead on whether these segregated schools deprive black children of protection equivalent to others. Chief Justice Earl Warren on May 17, 1954, read the unanimous decision reached by the court. We come then to the question presented: does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the physical facilities, and other tangible factors may be equal, deprive the children of the minority group of equal education opportunities? We believe that it does. We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate education facilities are inherited unequal. Therefore, we hold that the plaintiffs and others similarly situated for whom the actions have been brought are, by reason of the segregation complained of, deprived of the equal protection of the laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. The doctrine from the Plessy v. Ferguson case, which started separate but equal for public education, was struck down. The court ruling in favor of the plaintiffs, this required the mandatory desegregation of schools all across America, declaring it unconstitutional in the 21 states where it existed. While this decision was a crucial step forward for civil rights, this ruling was limited only to the segregation of schools, not applying to restaurants or restrooms, many of which continued with the separate facilities, and because there was no set date for the enforcement of the desegregation of these schools, resistance to this court decision were clearly made apparent.